a meeting like that on a bi-weekly basis where we're steering the direction of the work that we're planning for the next season, the next year, and the work that is going to be responsible for keeping us in compliance with the consent decree. So that oversight does happen, and that's a meeting that occurs every 2 weeks. So I just wanted to make sure that you're aware of that.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. That's the first time I've heard that. I've heard from people that other department heads haven't been involved. So
I can, if you like. I mean, I take attendance, so
yeah.
I can tell you that we do have that.
All right.
We have it every Thursday. It's actually in this room.
And just want to, if you will allow me, Mr. Chairman, one other question. Okay, I'll ask it anyways. Well, never mind. All right, now with this EPA, but why? I mean, as far as design and control of the project, I mean, other projects like the stadium or the St. Mary's ball field, were these designed and have somebody in charge of the project? Are those separate contracts, or that just they automatically get those?
No, those, as far as I understand, are separate. They would be overseen by whoever the department head was in that case. I think for St. Mary's, for example, that came out of the planning office. So
those were bidded on, the stadium in St. Mary's, as far as the design and the what is it, design and project management design.
So I don't know. I was involved in the design committee, but as far as the procurement part of it, I'm not sure. I think that's maybe a question.
Okay.
So they were, again, before taking office, but they were bid on. They were put out to bid.
Okay.
Yep.
And let me ask. Now, this money that you're asking for the budget, actually reduced it to, I see here, to 500 instead of the usual 750,000.
Right. So one thing that we found is that in our during our budget process, we found that there were certain accounts that had some lag money because the projects and the expenses don't necessarily go out by fiscal year. There's kind of a rolling 18-month period. There is money in the account that $750,000 a year gets appropriated. There is an amount of money that's kind of been left over. So, and we've been carrying it forward for a number of years. So instead of appropriating another $750,000, we've reduced the appropriation with the expectation that we'll use some of that carryover. It's a way to I think for me, it was eye-opening to be able to look at the accounts and see that there was carryover money available, which I was surprised to see. But it was a way for us to say, well, we might as well use some of that carryover money. It's been carrying over for over a number of years. We don't need to, if we don't need to appropriate $750, why should we? So right. That's why you see that reduction.
Well, that's a start. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
That's all.
Thank you, Councilor Patch. Councilor Haas.
I just want to congratulate the mayor for sitting down with the federal authorities trying to get an extension of this decree. I believe it's overbearing for the taxpayers of the community without question, and I think we'll get some positive results of it as we go on. Thank you, that's all.
Thank you, Councilor Haas. Council President Giannino?
I think that Councilor Patch asked most of our questions, so he covered all the bases. Thank you, Councilor.
Okay. I think myself, I know all of us up here share the concerns and the frustrations that Councilor Patch does with regard to the money that's being spent. It's a considerable amount of money. However, I think that in the long run, the money that's being spent is going to We will, it's work that has to be done. We're under a consent decree, but even beyond that, I think that as the cost of product at the MWRA rises significantly over the next several years, I think the inflow of storm water into the system will be reduced greatly when this entire project is completed, and as it goes on, as a matter of fact, and reduce the cost of the sewerage that we're being, and that will also rise significantly over the years to come, but at least we'll be in a position to reduce that somewhat by doing this work now. And I think that's a very positive thing. And again, Councilor Patch has very valid concerns and frustrations, and I share them, as do, I believe, the other members of this council. So that being said, we've got the next item. And are these are all tied in together, Mr. Mayor?
And so I think we had some presentations that would be available to be made if the committee would like that.
Sure.
So.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Would you
Well, let's do this first and take the vote.
You all have a copy of the map, so I don't think I'll put up the board. I just wanted to explain some of the information that was provided to you. Robert Button, Vice President with CDM Smith, with offices at 75 State Street in Boston. I believe at the council meeting last week, it was requested that we provide some information, some updates on work that has been done during the first 5 years of construction, which were 2011 through 2015. So what we've done is provided each one of the councilors with a map of all of the work that's been done all across the city. And as you can see, we've done a significant amount of work which is already providing significant benefits to the operation of the wastewater system and the stormwater system. We've been eliminating illicit discharges where people had incorrectly had their sewers connected to the storm drains. That was a major concern with EPA. We've done several of those. And we've been doing a lot of work with inflow removal, to your point, Councilor. All of that extra water that's leaking into the sewer pipes goes through the MWRA meters, and the city is billed for that water, yet you didn't generate revenue from it because it wasn't water that was sold, drinking water that was sold, or sewage that you're charging the customers for. It's water above and beyond that. So effectively, the city's paying for water that there's no revenue coming in for. So your point is right on. And in fact, the DEP commented that the city of Revere has moved well up or down on the MWRA list in terms of communities with significant II problems, and they commented in their most recent comment letters that in fact the city had made great progress in that regard. So you'll notice that every single sewer is shown on the maps and on those streets. They're the red pipes underneath. When you look at the map itself, you can see where there's a thicker shaded line in various colors. What we tried to represent is what work was done lining or rehabilitating those buried underground pipes in various years. So you should be able to tie that back to the legend and see which one of the various projects over the last 5 years helped to do that work. You'll also notice that throughout the city, we've identified locations where we found sump pumps and other inflow issues, various individual properties, and they'll show up, I believe, as pink and red and yellow on the map. So we've been using the GIS system to help coordinate and track the investigations for the sump pumps and the other problem inflow sources that we have. We've roughly inspected half of the properties in the city so far over the last couple of years, and we're aggressively trying to get the last of those properties inspected. The DEP and EPA are very focused on getting this inflow source out and making sure that we eliminate the sump pumps and other things that are problematic. So that is part of what the requests before you tonight are for. I think Councilor Morabito, you had some questions for this or wanted this particular map. So I don't know if you have any questions on it that I can help with.
I do. So, sorry, the map's in the way. It's a little small here.
I can provide it electronically to anyone if they'd like it as well, through the clerk. If you'd like me to do that, I'd be happy to do
Sure,
that.
that would be useful. On the lining phases, they're numbered 1 through 6, so are there are 6 phases in each lining of a street, or
No,
does every street have to go through 6 phases?
no, what happens is a phase is really a year, Counselor. So Phase 1 was year 1, Phase 2 was year 2. We just started in phases because that's the nomenclature that's in the consent decree. With respect to the amount of work on each street, in addition to lining the mainline sewer, we're also doing work lining laterals, we're lining manholes. So there are several processes which occur when they go down a street to do the lining. So that's why you may see trucks coming back, if that's your point, and see folks setting up on a street for several days at a time, because the process of doing the underground lining that we've been doing is one that is iterative and takes different crews to do different types of work. So that's why you maybe see people working longer, but the phases are really just the year in which the work was done.
Now, as far as in terms of location, so if you dig up one location, say if you're down the Shirley Ave area or the West Revere area, when you complete when you're completed with the work, right? Or how long is it the average time spent on a street, basically?
That's really hard because the streets are so many different lengths.
You don't stop what you're doing and then go patch up the street and then go back, do you?
No,
So
and,
once the street is complete, it's
and with respect to the
finalized, right?
lining work, Council, I'm sorry, with respect to the lining work, most of that is done in what they call in situ. So we don't dig the streets. We're doing it in that manner where we're effectively pulling a special liner, almost like a heart stent that gets inserted in your arteries. We're doing that in the sewer pipe.
And that's all gone through, okay.
And it's
through
all
the
done
sewer.
underground, so you don't have to go to all the
I
expense
just
of
want to
digging up the
clarify
pipes.
that.
Yes.
Just so you're not, when you're lining the pipes, you're not breaking up any of the roads, you're just basically going through the sewer.
With the exception of sometimes in the sewers, there'd be a
Winthrop
collapse where you have to fix an actual collapse and then line through the pipe because the collapse is such that you can't get the equipment through the line. So there are instances where, when we go out and do the investigations that we do, we determine that the pipe is damaged so badly that it needs to be repaired before we can do any lining or stabilization, and that's a pretty regular occurrence. Taft Street, I think, was one of the ones where we had 7 collapses within the pipe that had to be dealt with. There's no other way to do that other than to dig down and fix them, unfortunately. That's why we try to do so much lining, because it's much more cost-effective and less disruptive to fix it before it collapses than to allow it to collapse.
So the investigations were already done on what pipe needs.
Typically, the
correctly.
investigations are about a year ahead of the construction, because we need to investigate this year so that through our program management and design contract, we can design the work that gets bid and general contractors bid on, so that the low bidder for the construction work is in the following season. Typically, the investigations are a year ahead of the construction work.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Haas?
Bob, what's the consent decree, about $100 million thereabouts?
The exact value of the consent decree is still something we're working with EPA and DEP on. It could, in fact, be higher than the $100 million number. We've spent $100 million roughly to date with the various authorizations through the first 6 or 7 phases.
So we spent that already?
We're pretty close to that, yes.
Wow,
The magnitude of the lining, we've lined 50% of the city, roughly. We're likely going to have to line 90 to 95% of the city in order to satisfy the decree. So the state of disrepair and the amount of work that's necessary as we do more investigations, it's just in such a bad state of repair that it's requiring more work to do it. One of the things that we're trying to do is negotiate additional time so that we're not spending so much so fast.
That's
And
what the mayor indicated,
yeah,
right.
that's the
Now,
big deal.
As far as the streets that were done previously, why are they back again like this week?
Without knowing the specific of
Finley
exactly the street.
Malden Street, it seems like they were there before and they're back again now.
So I can maybe go through some specific questions if you had offline with you, but as an example, in the first 2 or 3 years, first 3 years of construction, we tried to hit the worst of the worst within the city because there just wasn't enough money to do it all. So we went throughout the city in a prioritized manner, and we got the most leaky pipes in one area, the most leaky pipes, and we're trying to work down that list. To Councilor Powers' point before about the cost of II, the pipes that are really leaking tremendously are very important to fix so that they don't collapse on us, or we can significantly reduce the amount of water that's leaking into them. So in those areas, we kind of triaged the city, did the worst of the worst first. Now we're going back and we're filling in. So you might notice on some of the maps when you see the color coding that maybe it was done in phase 1 and then we came back in phase 4. That was simply just because there wasn't enough money to do the entire area in phase 1. We did the absolute worst up front, and now we're trying to go back and get the next worst segment, if you will.
Now, as far as the subcontractors that are out there on our streets, who's checking out them?
So every one of the contractors that bids the work, competitively bids the work under Mass General Law, the specifications that we work with the city to develop have very specific requirements in terms of their qualifications, their licensure, that type of thing. So before the contracts are even awarded, we vet that information from the general contractor and from any specific subs that they're using so that we know that they're qualified and capable of doing the work and that they've got the appropriate licenses and staffing and that type of thing in order to complete the types of work that they're being charged with doing.
So they are being inspected after the fact?
No, and then what happens is just beforehand, we make sure that they're qualified. During the construction, we work with the city quite aggressively to make sure that they're actually doing the work that they're supposed to, that the work is being done in accordance with the specifications and the quality requirements that we have. And then when it comes time for them to apply for their payment requisitions from the city, that we actually agree with the work that they're asking for money for was done and that it was done properly and that it's appropriate to pay them. And as similar to what Mr. Rystrom said earlier about regular technical steering meetings, we also have regular construction meetings with the city engineer and DPW and others as appropriate, almost weekly during the peak of construction now to deal with that.
I was contacted by some of the DPW employees where they would, in the past, go out and supervise, make sure the work was done properly, and they're not doing that at the present time. Do you know anything about that?
Yep, absolutely.
Councilor, Mr. Chairman, through you to the councilor. We have had in the past DPW workers who would go out on overtime to after hours to follow along with a contractor. In my opinion, I'd like to have overtime be an emergency.
Absolutely.
And so that be the first priority, that folks be available for emergency purposes. And in the past, there had been multiple employees who would go out and follow a contractor. So we're trying to make sure that the schedule of the contractors kind of lines up with what the city wants to do in terms of overtime and kind of managing overtime to make sure that overtime is something that is either for additional scheduled work or in an emergency that there's.
I just want to make sure the work has been done
correctly, and we want to make sure I think there's a happy medium, and I've been in conversations with the DPW and specifically the DPW union to try to make sure that there's a happy medium in terms of the priorities in overtime be that there's emergency work, there's scheduled work, and that we're being productive with every penny that we spend.
Good. Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Hess. Councilor Patch.
For Bob Buttons. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the next project, or is it the project that we already okayed with the sub pumps that you're going to reconnect and I believe there's like thousands of them they're going to be doing.
There are roughly 10,500 properties within the city that need to be inspected as part of the sump pump program. We've been before the council for sump pump authorizations, and every year we're doing a certain amount in terms of the inspection to determine, do they have a sump pump? Is it connected properly? Is it connected improperly? And if it's connected improperly, what is the requirement to resolve that and get that flow out of the sewer? So the authorizations for sump pumps are to do a certain amount every year, and like I said, we're about halfway through that right now, and we've got roughly 320 properties under construction to have those repaired now, as well as another set of bids that's going out for the next round of projects that we've identified through the investigation so far.
Well, the only issue I have is some of them, I'm talking about even some of them are legal sump pumps, but they're draining, they might be going to the backyard. And now I'm being told that these people, they're gonna go out to the street. And in some points, like the one person that brought it to my attention, I believe had a meeting with one of the city engineers that came to his house, that they're going to take it out of the back, put it to the street. Now there's a drain, a sewer cover right between the.
Hopefully it's a storm drain and not a sewer.
Storm drain,
yes.
but they're not.
Yep.
They're just going to run it out to the street. Now I've had over the past several years, we have streets that don't have any drainage at all, as
Yep.
you know, which I thought
Yep.
should have been a priority, like Orvis Road, Sherman Street, that don't have any drainage at all. But even like on Carlson, I would, any kind of, it doesn't have to rain. I mean, some pump works during the winter. If it goes out to the street, it freezes. And I have to call the DPW to go sand it. And if we're going to have 10,000 of these going out to the street, I was told at the meeting, I believe, that they're not, or this guy was told that they're not going to go into the sewer because it costs too much money, that they're going to just put it out to the street. I think that would be creating a real problem for the DPW and for the city, and probably some damages. We could get sued. I mean, the car accidents and stuff. I mean, it really doesn't take much for that water, and it's unfortunately a lot of these sub pumps throw out a lot of water, and I just would hope that if you have to pay the extra buck to put it into the sewer, if they're fortunate enough to have one there, that they would do that.
Absolutely. There is not one solution to the sump pumps. There are actually several, Counselor. Sometimes for folks that have a little more yard area and want to, we can connect it to drain out to their yards. For other locations where there isn't a yard, or the yards are very, very small, or the yards are paved, for example, we try to get them out and make direct connections. And as you had indicated, there's several streets in the city, 40% of the city, that don't have stormwater drainage. So one of the cost drivers of the whole project is for those people to avoid the icing and the safety concerns that you're raising. We actually have to install drainage on several streets to deal with the consent decree problem. So what we're trying to do is get enough of those types in one street or a couple of streets so it makes economic sense to go in and extend a drain and pick up 6 or 8 or 10 sump pumps along the way. So we've had a number of folks that we've inspected, and our intention is to get back to everybody, but similar to the work we're doing in the sewer pipes, prioritize it so that we can get the biggest bang for the buck and fix problems without creating the icing problems and the other issues you've referenced, because we're well aware of those as well. And in some cases, people have tried to do the right thing. Homeowners have tried to, on their own accord, get it out to the street, take it out of the system, and have caused those types of problems. And we're working with DPW and inspectional services to try to address that.
All right, Bob, and just on the EPA consent decree, How much actually have we paid so far on that? I mean, are we, is there a figure? I mean, are we?
Yes, the number is, and we can get you a full list of all the SRF borrowings and the various costs, but the number is roughly $100 million in money that's been appropriated by the council for SRF loans, as well as operating costs that have come out in the last 6 or 7 years for the work that we've done, the work that other consultants have done in the city. It's not just us. There are several other folks who have been or who are working in the city. So we can give you a summary of all those expenses per year, but that's roughly where the number is.
Right. I mean, that's my major problem, is people ask me, how long, you know, how long is this going to go on? And fortunately, the mayor is working to have it increase the years here, but it just seems to be a bottomless pit here. And you know, I know you have to, the companies have to make money, but the taxpayers are paying the bill here, and I think they would like to see, I know I would like to see, like this $17 million, where the money is actually going, and who's getting what. That's all. I mean, I don't think I'm asking for too much here.
No,
we never got that. We just come, you come before us, you give us a nice presentation, and it always gets approved. And we have to show some responsibility to the taxpayers who put us here. You know, it's time that we show them some results, and that it's actually going, it's being successful, and where the money is actually going. That's my key points. And if you could provide that, that'd be great.
We've worked extensively with the city auditor and the treasurer as well, so the auditor has files of all the information and all the accounts. So we're continuously working with various folks within the city's financial team to go through that, so we'll work with the auditor to get you that information.
That would be good. And as far as the, which Councilor Haas brought up with the DBW, I mean, that was a great, I thought that was a great idea, that they actually go and make sure that the work is done correctly. You know, for a few overtime hours, I don't think, I think it's well worth it. We're paying so much money to you guys, and you know, there's really no comparison for like $50,000 worth of overtime to see that $1 million job gets done correctly. That's just another point I'd like to mention. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Patch. I know Councilor McKenna has some questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. Councilor?
Mr. Button, we had, you did some work on Winthrop Ave, 220 Winthrop Ave, right next to the Mackin Field about 4 years ago. I think it was 2012. And we have a major water problem there. There's no drainage. The water's building up. It's getting into residential homes. We've had a quick solution, but I don't know if the Housing Authority would allow us to do that quick solution. Residents say that this has been over a couple of years, and I've talked to Nick Rystrom, and he said it's been caused, the problem's been caused by the work that they're doing on the bridge. There's a pipe, a blockage or something.
Yes.
But as I talk to residents, they're saying that this is well before the bridge started the work. The problem's increasing, and the DPW, every time it rains, the DPW has to, not the DPW, sorry, the water department has to go down and pump the water out of Winthrop Ave into a sewer that's on the Housing Authority property. Is there any way that you guys could go down there and just take a look at that pipe to see if there's a, I mean, I don't know if you can recheck it or not, but if there's a flow or if there's something, if there's a blockage, because it seems to be that the water's coming from across the street, that sewer is blocked, And what's happening is the overflow's coming across the street onto the residential property. And that's where they have to take that water out and put it into, they have to pump it into the Housing Authority sewer.
Yes, Counselor, I can answer that, and I think Nick Rystrom actually can help with that answer as well. But over the course of the last several months, we've been working with the city engineer, and we have been investigating those pipes. We've been sending cameras and other equipment down in to try to find where the blockage is. And Nick has some updates on that for you.
Counselor, how are you? So we had done, working with CDM and some of our other contractors, we were able to TV that line. We tried to do some jetting work, see if we could determine what was the cause of the blockage that was there. Turns out, and after some of our investigation, what we found was that there was some type of an obstruction or blockage that was very close to where the bridge, the western bridge abutment is. And this is information I provided to DOT, who then did their own little investigation over the last 2 or 3 weeks. And turns out that what their opinion is that when they were doing the work on that western abutment, they had a tieback that they had installed. And when they installed that tieback, they clipped that line. And they filled it with the grout for the tieback, and it ended up filling up that pipe and causing a blockage. So it turns out that the problem was, in fact, a result of the bridge work that was done. We are now in the process of trying to work with DOT to come up with a solution to resolve that problem, because, as we have talked about, I'm very aware that the flooding problems that exist when even a small amount of rain falls. So I actually was out with DOT this afternoon to discuss this, this very thing. And so the update or the situation that we have is that it was something related to the bridge, and we're trying to work with DOT to get them to resolve it. Obviously, we want to do it as fast as possible. But that's where we're at this point. Your thought about going through the housing authority property is not unfounded. It may be a good solution. We want to just make sure that it's going to be, if we do go that route, that it is a long-term solution, that it won't be causing us any more problems, down the road. So we're at a point where we're coordinating with the state, and hopefully we're going to get to a point where that's resolved very soon.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councilor McKinnon. I just have a question and a concern, okay? And then we'll take a vote on these 4 loan orders. I'm looking here at the legend, the orange.
Yep.
And Lower Revere Street down near the dog track, part of North Shore Road. According to the legend, it indicates remove and replace. I'm assuming that this is the
I'm sorry, Counselor, if I could just get the map. Make sure I'm talking to the right question. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, I think that is just a similar colors, Counselor, that the orange CIPP lining in Phase 4, we're not actually removing all of those sewers. I think it's just a color similarity.
If you look at the legend, that's...
Yep, no, that's a very good catch, sir, and I think it's just a color similarity. It's not our intention to remove all those sewers.
Okay.
Those have already been lined.
Okay. And the other question I have is there's a line that runs from the area of Pines Road.
Okay.
I think it's either a 12 or it maybe builds up to an 18. I think Mr. Rystrom's familiar with that. And it runs over to the pump station, the stormwater pump station on Rice Avenue. Are there any plans to do something with that? And I'll tell you why. It runs through a lot of yards down there and driveways, and of course the city has easements. And people down there are looking to do something with their, if they have a driveway that's sinking, they want to replace it. And maybe part of the sinking of the driveway is due to maybe cracks in that line that's causing.
Very likely, yep, very likely.
What are the plans to do anything with that line? And if so, if there are plans, when?
Yeah, I don't know what the timing is, maybe Nick could help with that one.
Councilor, so as a response to your council, I think, order from late 2015, we actually investigated that whole drain line, that's the cross-country. We found that there were some deficiencies in that line. The most major one was really, a partial collapse up to the north, closer to the where the pump station is. So we were making provisions to repair that. The full line itself, the thought is because it's cross-country, we're looking at rehab in place. Obviously, we don't want to go through and dig up, everybody's yard. We don't have a schedule yet for rehab of the line that's not deteriorated to the point that it's collapsed, but it is something that is on our radar and that would be addressed, as soon as we're able to do that. I can tell you that the collapse is something that one, serious deficiency is something that we plan to address as soon as possible, this construction season, actually, if we can. But otherwise, it's, like I said, it's on the radar, but there's not a definitive schedule for that.
Am I correct when I say that this line services most of the manholes in that Point of Pines area down there?
So that line it starts at Harrington, and it runs all the way to, I think, the intersection of Rice and Witherby, I believe it is.
Yep.
And so it collects all of the drain, that whole subcatchment is collected by that line. So all of the pines, essentially, if there is a drain infrastructure, it ties into that line and makes its way out to that pump station. In some cases, on a lot of the streets up there, there is only drain infrastructure in the street, one or two sections to either side of that line, and so it doesn't extend all the way to the end, to the Linway, for example, or to Rice Ave on the other end. But everything drain-wise that is in the Pines does go, at some point, up through there.
Yep.
So that's correct.
Thank you very much. And Bob,
No problem.
Dunn Road.
Say that again, I'm sorry, Councilor.
Dunn Road. Are there any plans to add any catch basins down on Dunn Road or Shawmut Street?
Yeah, that's the collapsed area, right? We were looking at more drainage in Shawmut and Dunn Road. Yeah, we just fixed that last year. In terms of additional drainage, one of the things that we're looking at is the consent decree requires certain stormwater projects because the water has to come out of the sewer system.
Yep.
Other projects that help with just general stormwater and flooding aren't necessarily a requirement of the decree. So what we're trying to do is balance any additional work above and beyond what the minimums are, and make sure that we're spending the SRF money on consent decree driven issues, and then if there's some extra catch basins or whatnot that need to be added, that maybe would work through the DPW as part of potentially a separate project.
Because those people down there have little or no catch basins on the street down there. And I think that's unconscionable that people would have to endure that type of a situation during a heavy storm.
Yeah, there's roughly 40% of the geographic area of the city that's in the 100-year floodplain. So unfortunately, there are areas like that there isn't really a quick fix, that those catch basins may actually need another pump station to draw the water out just because of the difference in elevations in some of these areas. So we're looking at all of that, Councilor.
Okay, and just one other thing. When the contractors go into these neighborhoods, we had a situation down on Sagamore Street a couple of weeks ago. They surrounded a house with equipment. When they're not working, they park the equipment. In one particular house down there, they had 3 heavy pieces of equipment around it, making it literally impossible or extremely difficult for people to get in and out of their homes. And there's an area down on, if they're working down there in the future, there's an area down on Dunn Road on the if you're going down Dunn Road on the left-hand side near the dog track property where they could certainly park that equipment during the evenings so as to not to inconvenience the residents down there.
Sure. We absolutely don't want to inconvenience the residents, and when we do go into a neighborhood, we try to work pretty aggressively with the contractor and our inspectors to coordinate that so we're not holding people up getting in and out of their homes and that type of thing. The contractors do have yards around the city to store their equipment. I believe Suffolk Downs is a big area where National Water Main is storing a lot of equipment. So we are trying to keep it off the streets. One of the things people don't always realize is sometimes that equipment is parked there, but it's actually accessing and working in a sewer that's 200 or 300 or 400 feet away. So sometimes people don't realize that they're there for an extended period of time because they're working underground and don't see what's happening. So there could be a number of different reasons why those equipment's
Yeah, this stuff
there.
was there all night long, and
Yeah, and some work we do at night as well, Counselor, so I'd have to look into that, but we will make sure that we try to inconvenience people as little as possible.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Madam Clerk, we're going to call the roll now on the 4 bond authorizations.
On approval of the 4 bond authorizations, Counselor Haas? Yes. Counselor Morbido? Yes. Counselor Patch?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Rotundo is absent. Council President Janino? Yes. And Chairman Powers?
Yes,
Yes, the loan orders will be favorably recommended to
and
the
that
full city
concludes
council.
the meeting for these items.